What's up, everybody? Welcome back to NASCAR Coast to Coast, where we go coast to coast, diving into all things NASCAR regional. As always, here in the Charlotte, North Carolina studios, my name is Chris Wilner, MRN pit reporter, and MRN announcer Kyle Rickey out in Connecticut. K-Rick coming off a birthday weekend. How was your birthday? And it was pretty cool. We got to spend it together, kicking off your birthday week over the weekend out there in Portland.
We did. On the other coast, on the West Coast.
Literally, we took the show coast to coast.
We did. Had a great weekend there with the ARCA Menards West Series to kick things off, the NASCAR Xfinity Series on Saturday. We kind of together got to watch all the action from right behind me here at the Stafford Motor Speedway on Friday night, the NASCAR Wheel and Modified Tour race on Saturday night. So we spent a lot of time streaming together and obviously working some live events together as well at Portland International Raceway. Great time, great weather out there, good crowd both days. Great time to be had by all.
Certainly is, and Kyle was doing some sort of multitasking I've never seen before when he's got the Flow broadcast on trying to call an ARCA West race. It was a sight to see, but no, great times had by all. Happy birthday again as we continue your birthday week, but boy, what a big weekend of racing. It seems like we don't slow down, right? We get to Memorial Day weekend. It's this huge celebration of motorsports when you have all these marquee events, and then we just dive right back into it here into the month of June. And speaking of busy drivers, one of the busiest drivers, or one of a handful of busy drivers, Luke Fenhaus is going to join us on this week's episode in segment number 2. We're going to talk about his top 10 in the Truck Series out at Gateway Worldwide Technology Raceway. Of course, we had a split crew there as well, so the teams were busy, and we'll talk to Luke about that effort as well as what's to come in 2024. But K-Rick, as always, let's start with the weekend that was. Of course, we were out in Portland, but the Cars Tour put on arguably the race of the year, the late model stock, 7/1000ths of a second. Connor Hall, it looked like on film it was Brent Cruz, but it was Connor Hall by probably the length of a fingertip out at Langley for the VisitHampton.com 125. Kyle, I don't know how you take that level of talent, and throughout that entire race, it comes down to 7/1000ths of a second, but it did, and it is going to be talked about here for probably the rest of the year as probably one of the best races of the season.
It's amazing how many times we see these photo finishes, and when you see it live by the naked eye, you think one driver won. We saw it earlier this year in the NASCAR Cup Series. And then when you go back and you look at the replay, you're like, oh, wait a minute. That driver didn't win, granted by like this much. Yeah. But, three cars nose to nose to nose crossing the start finish line, an incredible finish set up by a late race caution flag, a green white checkered finish there, and it was Hall over Quapple over Cruz, and like you mentioned, 7/1000ths of a second. Tried to find the differential between the top three because it couldn't have been much more than 7/1000ths of a second because they were tight at the flag.
100%. And it's also, too, it's your championship combatants as well. It's not like this was, somebody's career best performance. I mean, if you look at it, the championship, it's Connor Hall, it's Carson Quapple, and it's Brent Cruz up there inside the top 5. So, I mean, this had major championship implications as well. Connor Hall, of course, we've talked about it. Currently, I believe, still leading the NASCAR Advanced Auto Parts National Championship weekly standings as he's dominated at several different racetracks. But, of course, running in the Cars Late Model Stock Tour full-time, gets another win this season. Again, Brent Cruz, though, what more can you say? Led up the first 100 laps or so, looked to be the dominant car. He's going to be a star and a force to be reckoned with, but came up just short. Brendan Queen, Kyle, talk about dramatics on a dramatic evening. I mean, I thought he was going to win the race. Everybody thought he was going to win the race. I mean, it seemed like it was just up and down for several drivers over the course of the night.
And then he had that bumper bar come loose late in the event. Yeah. Spun in turn 2, and I think somebody got into the back of him, or actually got into the back of the bumper bar that was dragging, spun the car out, and then he went to the infield, and obviously his shot at the win at that point was over because it happened so late in the race. So, yeah, a lot of highs and lows for a lot of different drivers on the racetrack. A very dramatic event, no doubt, their best event of the year. Great crowd on hand for the race, and they saw a whale of an event from start to finish.
It's a great racetrack, and of course, site of the Hampton Heat as the Virginia Triple Crown gets underway later this summer. So if this is a teaser, you're going to definitely want to tune into that one coming up here in about a month or two. But Brendan Queen still has a 5-point lead somehow throughout all of this in the Late Model Stock Championship, of course, as we go to Dominion on June 15th. So we have the weekend off before we go to Dominion for the Cars Tour, and buckle up, because we're not done yet with great finishes with the Cars Late Model Stock Tour. Moving from there to the Northeast and the Ground Pounders, the NASCAR Wheel and Modified Tour, the JNR Precast 150 at Seekonk. Kyle, you and I were tuning into Flow Racing from Portland. Tight bull ring, tight racing. Looked like maybe Ron Silk could pull one out of the bag and come from, I think he started outside the top 5 in one of the late restarts, but big money Matt Hirschman, when he's in the field, you can't count him out, and certainly got the job done out there this weekend.
Qualified well for Matt Hirschman, but they do this redraw now at a lot of events throughout the season, and unfortunately started in the 8th position, which is tough at Seekonk Speedway. It's a very quick race, not a lot of time to gain ground, not a lot of cautions to help you get through the field. And that's what we saw in this race, relatively caution-free, just one caution due to the spin by Tyler Catalano midway through the event, about 50 laps to go. He got turned around in turn 3. Other than that, very quick race, and it was Matt Hirschman, just kind of managing his tires like he usually does, hanging around the 5th, 6th, 7th position for much of the race. And then when it was go time, he went to the front in a big way and took the lead in the closing laps and went on to claim his first NASCAR Wheel and Modified Tour win of the year.
That's right. He certainly did. And my pick, if you recall, going into the race when we were out in Portland having dinner, I said Austin Beers, probably going to be my guy. And boy, it looked good for Austin for quite a bit of time, but here comes Matt there at the late restart that got by Austin Beers to move on to the win. But Ron Silk throughout all that had a quiet but yet productive afternoon, or I guess evening, out there at Seekonk. He continues to lead the championship. 14 markers, though, Kyle, over Justin Bonsignor, and of course Justin's going to have a big weekend when we get to New Hampshire coming up, running the NASCAR Xfinity Series, but and that's actually their next event, so they've got a couple of weeks off. I mean, obviously it's going to be back and forth, Kyle, but, I feel like for Justin, you got to start adding some wins in the tally to kind of get back in this thing. Solid finishes are one thing, but wins really, it seems like in this series right now, are going to put you over the top.
And Ron's doing what Ron does when he wins the championship, and that's just, stay out of trouble, be consistent, run toward the front of the field, stay among the top 3, top 5, and that's what he did at Seekonk, New Hampshire. Obviously, a completely different event from what these drivers have been used to over the last 5 weeks with their bull ring stretch on the schedule, with Monadnock, with Riverhead, and now with Seekonk. So a completely different game here in a couple of weeks for the NASCAR Wheel and Modified Tour, I guess, at their super speedway up here in the Northeast.
That's right. Mohegan Sun 100 at New Hampshire, June 22nd is next on the docket for them. Quickly, NASCAR Canada, north of the border, round number 2 of their 2024 season, the Bud Light 300 at Autodrome Chaudière. And Kyle, we heard from the series director earlier this year about Andrew Rangers, one of the stalwarts of the series, 3-time series champ, finally gets back to Victory Lane. It's been well over a year since he's visited Victory Lane, and he got it done in round number 2 of the season, holding off his teammate. It was a 1-2 with Kevin Lacroix in second. Really good racing, I thought, Kyle, overall, and so far so good, off to a great start this season for the NASCAR Canada Series.
Kind of like Matt Hirschman in the modifieds, Andrew Ranger saved his stuff and used it when it counted the most, taking the lead from Lacroix with 9 laps to go there. A spectacular crowd. I know they were talking on the NASCAR Canada broadcast, one of the largest short track crowds that they have seen in recent memory for the NASCAR Canada Series. So good for that series. Another great car count for the second week in a row, coming off of their season opener at the Canadian Tire Motorsports Park in Bowmanville, Ontario, a couple of weeks back. 2 great races, and Andrew Ranger, no doubt the star of that series for almost 2 decades now, getting it done. I remember during driver intros years ago in Montreal when we went there for the NASCAR Xfinity race, we would always stay for the NASCAR Canada race. And whenever Andrew was introduced, the place erupted. And now all these years later, they're still cheering Andrew on, and in a loud way this past weekend.
100%. Really cool to see Andrew Ranger break back into victory lane. Marc-Antoine Camarand, who won the season opener, finished third, his second straight podium, so continues to pace the field in the point standings early on this year. Of course, they will have a 2-week break before going to Newfoundland and Eastbound International Speedway coming up later in this month of June. All right, some other quick winners. How about Seth Christensen, 2 for 2 in the Alan Turner Pro Late Models out at Five Flags, kind of the mainstay of that racetrack, the big Pro Late Model series out there. He's starting the year off great. And Evan Getz, a Kawicki Driver Development finalist, one of those finalists we talk about when they released those earlier this year. $26,000 to win. He got it done at Wenatchee Super Oval in the 200 out over the weekend. He had to fend off Bubba Pollard, so not a slouch there for sure. Congratulations to Evan. But then we get to the ARCA Menard Series West out at Portland.
Sawalich has hit that lap traffic. He tried to go to driver's right, and David Smith didn't know he was there. Looks like Sawalich had to cross over to the left. It's going to cost him some time, but he's bought himself enough of an advantage that it's not going to matter. William Sawalich up through the gears for the final time.
Off of turn number 12 for the final time for William Sawalich, looking for the checkered flag and the win here at Portland International Raceway. William Sawalich wins the Portland 112 here at Portland Raceway for the ARCA Menards West Series.
That's how it sounded on the Motor Racing Network. Kyle Rickey anchoring the ARCA West coverage for the Motor Racing Network. And Kyle, William Sawalich told me, especially in Victory Lane, restarts and road courses. Those were my 2 check marks that I needed to get down pat if I'm going to continue on with my career. Boy, he got both of those done in Portland. He had several restarts and, of course, looked to be one of the best race cars, if not the best race car throughout the night there in Portland.
Yeah, he figured it out there and had plenty of opportunities late in the race. It looked like at the start of the event for much of the first half, that is, Brandon Jones, the NASCAR Xfinity Series regular who was getting some extra laps there at Portland, looked like he was going to kind of run away with it. And at one point, he was with William Sawalich. They were, I think, 14 or 15 seconds ahead of everybody else. The caution allowed them to get bunched up. He took the lead on one of those late restarts, and then he was able to pace Brandon to the checkered flag. Good race, good field. It was nice to see the West race there, not in the rain, like we saw a couple of years ago, and a perfect day, and just a great event all around. And congratulations to William. I don't think it's a huge surprise. He's pretty good wherever he goes, and no matter what type of racetrack it is.
100%, and we're going to continue to talk about William and his career as it continues to blossom, but kudos to Isabella Robusto. We talked about her, had her on NASCAR Coast to Coast earlier this year, talking about her kind of recovery back to full-time racing after the concussion a year ago. Boy, in contention as well, had to make a couple of daring passes there in the late restart, finished in the podium spot in third place. She was absolutely ecstatic, one of the up-and-comers out of the Toyota Racing Development Camp. I expect big things out of her, more moving on this year. Of course, going back to a road course at Sonoma coming up this weekend. She was super confident after this one in Portland, so expect Isabella to have a good run. But you're right, it was Brandon Jones until the pit stop. Unfortunately, the changes that they made just didn't work out, and William Sawalich was able to capitalize. So, really good race, really clean race, with the exception of Jack Wood throwing it in there on the last restart. But hey, you got to be a hero. Somebody's got to try. Didn't stick, but that's all right. We'll see them out at Sonoma coming up this weekend. So before we get to our guest this week, that's Luke Fenhaus. How about some top regional performers, Kyle, on the NASCAR Craftsman Truck Series out at Gateway? Speaking of which, Luke Fenhaus, a top 10 run in his debut with ThorSport, but the driver we had on last week, Andres Perez, said, I'm confident going into my debut with Spire. Gateway doesn't scare me. Well, it certainly didn't, as he got a top 10 finish in 9th. So what do you think about those two performances?
Yeah, 9th and 10th place performances. I guess that's all you can ask for, right? Finish the laps, get as much experience as you can on what was an ever-changing racetrack. They practiced and qualified in the heat of the day. On Friday, it rains. The track is completely green when they go racing on Saturday. So a lot of learning opportunity for these young drivers on Saturday afternoon, and they made the best of it. They beat some of the best in the series, and good for them. There are two drivers that have made a lot of noise here in the short track level the last 2 years, and here they come. We talk about it on this show all the time. It's fun watching these drivers kind of climb that ladder in the sport, whether it be from the late models to the modifieds up to the NASCAR National Spotlight. And that's what we're seeing here.
It's been a year of top performances by our regional drivers making a name for themselves at the National Series. Of course, Corey Heim doing Corey Heim things, former ARCA graduate, just went out and won another one, his 4th of the year, so congratulations to him. All right, let's get to our guest. He's standing by. Luke Fenhaus going to talk about his trip out to Worldwide Technology Raceway at Gateway, and of course, what's to come this year. He's next here live on NASCAR Coast to Coast, brought to you by Whelen Engineering.
Whelen Engineering, a global leader in the emergency warning industry, designs and manufactures reliable and powerful warning lights, white illumination lighting, sirens, controllers, and warning systems for the automotive, aviation, and mass notification industries worldwide. Whelen products are designed, sourced, and manufactured in America and tested on site to meet the toughest industry standards. Whelen Engineering, manufactured in America for over 70 years. We never left, and we're here to stay.
Welcome back to NASCAR Coast to Coast, brought to you by Whelen Engineering. Joining us on the line now here via the phone, that is Mr. Luke Fenhaus. Top 10 finish in his Craftsman Truck Series debut over the weekend out in the shadow of the arches at Worldwide Technology Raceway. Luke, first off, congratulations, man. Top 10 is huge in a debut. What were your overall thoughts now that you have a few days to kind of recap it all and relive it?
Yeah, for sure. I want to thank you guys for having me on. I appreciate it very much. And just want to recap our day. I mean, it was kind of a good day. I guess you could experience a lot worse things. But, we took kind of looking like a bad day, starting in the back and struggling with the aero-wise and passing and making moves and turned it into a good day and rebounded well. So, obviously, my Thor Sport 66 guys did a really good job, and they obviously kind of got a little lucky with the late race caution, and that helped us out a ton. But just a big learning experience for me.
At what point during the event did the confidence kick in? Obviously, you go from 32nd in stage 1 to 10th at the end of the race. So you figured something out. And did the confidence increase as you were, coming through the field? Because they say confidence, can be the big, can be key.
Yeah, for sure. Obviously, lap 10, I kind of busted my butt going into 1, spun early, got caught a lap down. And that really kind of took a turn for our day. And so it just put us on a weird pit strategy with tires. We came and got tires. And that kind of just threw us for a loop. So it was a hard day to rebound and get back to it. But obviously you can, once you start racing with those guys and figuring out how aggressive you can be with the aero-wise and just figuring it out, it's just such a different type of racing than the late model side of it or even ARCA side of it. So that was the biggest thing for me, but we slowly, gradually got it understood and worked on it. And, by the end of the day, we were top 10 and, now we should be really good when we go to the next one.
I know you talked about the air kind of being difficult, but was there anything that surprised you? It's always interesting to talk to like a Brendan Butterbean Queen who made his truck debut at Wilkesboro, or even Carson Quapple, some of these late model guys that are getting opportunities. They kind of find different elements and said, man, I didn't expect that, or I didn't think it was going to feel this way. What surprised you out there at Gateway this weekend?
Well, I guess probably just the aero tightness and just the stalling out when you got within 2 to 3 truck lengths, I guess you could call it. And that was the hardest thing, was you could get a good run and you could run a tenth or 2 quicker, but once you got to 2 truck lengths, you would stall out and it would just be hard to maintain that. So, obviously I relied on time with Jesse a lot, and he's a great race car driver. And, he always said Gateway was one of the toughest places they go to aero-wise. So, to try to understand that and battle that throughout the day was obviously tough, but to, get track position where we needed it and, make the most of the restarts. I like our day because when you started back there, we learned so many things, from passing to late race restarts to, maintaining ground to everything. So very thankful we had a good day and obviously finishing top 10 was great at the end.
You just touched on my next question with talking to Ty Majeski and getting some advice. I was going to say there's a lot of resources there at ThorSport, including in that driver lineup with probably the most veteran driver in the series in Matt Crafton, a multi-time champion in Ben Rhodes here in recent years. Were you able to go to them at all? Plus all of the crew chiefs, most of them have a lot of years doing this NASCAR Craftsman Truck Series tour.
Yeah, so I was down there for a couple weeks prior to, and just wanted to, get the feel of my team, get the feel of other guys' teams, and talk with everybody. Obviously, a lot of them, are at the shop week to week. They're in and out, so they're stationary, so it's hard to see those guys. But got to talk to everybody. Got to talk to Matt a lot at the racetrack. I talked to Jake. Jake and I kind of grew up racing late models together, and just relied on all of them. They're all great guys. They're all great helpers, and you can rely on really any single one of those guys. So, just a great group overall. Team-wise, race car driver-wise, it's a great group to rely on, and they're always there to help you out, and it's good to have teammates like that.
When you look at this year alone, Luke, and you look at just the number of, we'll call you kind of in a big umbrella, like our NASCAR regional drivers that are getting opportunities, whether it's yourself or Carson Kvapil, Bubba Pollard we saw earlier this year. What does it mean to you to be a part of that group, and why do you think that maybe this year more and more of you guys are getting these calls to the big time? I mean, it's one, got to be pretty special to be part of this group, but two, why do you think that is? I mean, is it something about just kind of the nature of the sport now, or what do you think?
Well, that's a good question. I think, a lot of good drivers were there right away with Josh Wise when they kind of took under that Chevy umbrella of development drivers, and really it was, right away it was me, Kvapil, Sawalowicz, Zilich, Rochelle, and so those are really good race car drivers, and I think all 5, 6 of us have done really, really good and shown our potential, and I think we're all capable of being to the top level. Obviously, Kvapil showed it week in and week out, and so you get that. You learn from Josh Wise. He does so much with driver development, and they're so good at it. And they practice it so much, and it makes them really tough to beat. Like Raja's still with them, Nick Sanchez is still with them, and they're hard drivers, and they know what they're doing, and they're experienced. And so to grow up in kind of that era and be thankful for that, that went a long ways. But now, it's just kind of getting opportunities, right? I wasn't raised with money. I came from Wausau, Wisconsin, and my opportunity through ThorSport was SodaSense. And so SodaSense got clicked with Ty and I, and, it was just kind of a collaboration that worked out really, really good, and, hoping to grow some more and get a couple more races in.
The race weekend in Gateway, we've seen a lot of these condensed weekends lately where practice and qualifying is like 2 hours before the race, and there's not a lot of time to digest information. This past weekend was not like that. You had Friday night to kind of figure out and understand what you learned in practice and qualifying on Friday for the race on Saturday. How beneficial was that time?
Yeah, obviously, you only get 25 minutes really.
That's true.
And then you qualify, and you're in the show. So it doesn't take long, and you got to get up to speed. We turned our best lap. I think it was lap 3, and I think that put us 13th in practice. And I said, I don't really know how that's our fastest lap because I barely knew what I was doing around this place. And so things happen very quickly, and as a race car driver, you need to be able to take that in and learn very quickly as well. We figure it out, whether it's racetrack, race car, whatever it is, you have to be prepared. And obviously we were really prepared. I think, we watched a lot of video. We did, a lot at the shop at ThorSport, and, got some Ford simulator times. So it was all really good. And, now when we go to the next one, I'm a little more prepared and not as green on the aero side of things, and just have more laps under my belt. So just a big learning experience, but thankful to have a rough start to the day and rebound really well and go through those experiences.
All right, so we check off your truck debut on Luke. Obviously working to get more truck races, but how are the late models, how's the late model side going, and could we possibly be seeing you defend your ARCA win at Iowa coming up next week?
Yeah, I wish I was. On the ARCA side, I don't have too much going on. It's, obviously everything takes money, and that's just kind of the world we're living in right now. And so,
sure.
Trying like all heck, to keep getting more. Obviously, our late model side has been really good and really bad at sometimes, but we're working on it and getting it really better for this next year. And, we're touring right around 15 to 20 races this year. So that keeps us busy when we're not on the truck side or the ARCA side or whatever I may be doing. And, hopefully more truck starts to come and, we find a little bit more funding and have some fun later on this year.
Guess my final question for you is, what are some of those short track events coming up in the near future for you?
Well, we're going to run a couple at Slinger Speedway, and, Wisconsin's just such a big short track region for me, and the late model racing is so strong that it's hard to kind of walk away from this. So, we're doing a couple at Slinger Speedway. We're touring kind of the whole Midwest, part of the ARCA Midwest Tour, and a couple ASA races, but kind of the crown jewels is what I'm trying to aim for. And obviously Dixieland has been a big race up in Kaukauna, Wisconsin, and that has been on my bucket list for a while. And so we finished really good there past couple of years and had really good race cars. So hopefully we can turn this into a couple more and keep clicking off these wins.
Yeah, it's always fun to watch that race. Of course, one of my bucket list races to attend in person, Slinger as well, and as a Slinger champion, that's pretty awesome as well. But my final question for you, too, is you mentioned Ty Majeski. You guys are kind of the face of short track racing in Wisconsin. When you look at just your accomplishments, do you kind of get a sense of if Ty's at the racetrack, like there's a little bit of a extra motivation to beat him when you guys are at a race, whether it's a ASA Midwest race or anything like that? When he's in the field, I mean, what's it like going up against Ty and just kind of you guys being the face of that area's short track racing?
Yeah, I mean, he's been honestly really the best, for a little while, especially in my era, because I've only been, short track racing for 4 or 5 years now. And so, to when you get a relationship going like Toby and Ty have, it's hard to beat that. Most of these drivers in Wisconsin, at least, don't get, much more than 2 to 3 years with a crew chief, and then they have, something else happens in life or whatever. And so that's the biggest thing, is to build that connection and grow and understand each other and then balance it off that. And obviously they have done a great job. They are the ones to beat every time they come to the racetrack. This year they're really, really fast. And, so that makes it fun. I like when they come, and I wish he'd come to all of them, and he is mostly coming to all of them. And, when you have a good race car and get to race them for the win and get to beat them, it feels good at the end of the day. So hopefully we can continue to build fast race cars and tune ours into the right way and have good weekends coming up.
Thank you so much, Luke. Luke Fenhaus, top 10 finish in his Craftsman Truck Series debut in the Shadow of the Arches at Worldwide Technology Raceway. Coming up next here on Coast to Coast, we've got some news and notes, drivers inking some deals, plus a little bit of debate with me and Kyle, and of course the calendar as we wrap up this week's episode of NASCAR Coast to Coast, brought to you by Wheelin' Engineering.
Whelen Engineering, a global leader in the emergency warning industry, designs and manufactures reliable and powerful warning lights, white illumination lighting, sirens, controllers, and warning systems for the automotive, aviation, and mass notification industries worldwide. Whelen products are designed, sourced, and manufactured in America and tested on site to meet the toughest industry standards. Whelen Engineering, manufactured in America for over 70 years. We never left, and we're here to stay.
Welcome back to NASCAR Coast to Coast, brought to you by Whelen Engineering, manufactured in America for over 70 years. Whelen Engineering. Great conversation with Luke. Appreciate him for joining us on the show. Some news and notes, Kyle. We've got more drivers inking deals to run at the next level, including Brendan Butterbean Queen. 2 more races. It didn't take long, right? Finished top 5 in your truck debut. You're probably going to get a phone call, and he did again from Tricon Garage.
Top 5 came at the North Wilkesboro Speedway a couple of weeks ago. We'll see him next at the Nashville Super Speedway here at the end of the month of June. We'll see him for at least 2 more events. I assume the Nashville race will go well for him as well. It seems like he adapts perfectly to these NASCAR Craftsman trucks. First at the short track level, in his comfort zone there at North Wilkesboro, where he's had laps. It'll be interesting to see what he can do much higher speeds when they get to Nashville here at the end of the month. And, aero becomes more prevalent than what we saw just a couple of weeks back.
100%. He's going to have a lot of studying, but some time to get that done before he gets back in the truck. Again, like Kyle mentioned, it'll be Nashville and Kansas, the 2 races that Butterbean has inked. On the late model side of things, some more Cup Series stars moving over to run and moonlight and some late model events here this year. Josh Berry announced this week he's going to run and join Ross Chastain as a couple of Cup Series regulars at the Battle of Broadway 150 at Nashville Fairgrounds Speedway, of course, leading in to NASCAR weekend at the end of the month. He's teaming up with 3-time track champion Dylan Fetcho, so not a bad guy to team up with and have a good race car with, and that's a JEG CRA kind of all-star event out there at the fairgrounds. And Kevin Harvick, Kyle, not going to take long for him. We saw him get back in the seat for practice and qualifying for the all-star race. Scratched that itch a little bit, and he said, all right, I'm going to go ready to go late model racing. He's going to take his Kevin Harvick Incorporated 62 out for a couple events, Five Flag Speedway for a Blizzard Series super late event, and then, of course, the rescheduled Cars late model stock and pro late model race out at North Wilkesboro August 3rd. Kevin Harvick in the late model stock. What do you think about KH getting back behind the wheel?
Well, like you mentioned, he got the itch a couple of weeks ago practicing for Kyle Larson at the All-Star race. It's obviously his series, so he can pretty much, enter as he pleases. He's off for the rest of the year as, his television obligations have, come to an end or will come to an end here shortly. So he's got time and it's within driving distance of Charlotte. So it's just a couple of hours away. And, it's going to be a big event, rescheduled to August 3rd, and now he's going to be a part of it. This is what we want to see, right? Across the country. We want to see these NASCAR, former stars and current stars, head to short tracks and, kind of, I don't want to say rebuild the grassroots, but at least rebuild that connection between grassroots racing and the top levels of the sport. And, that's what these guys are going to be doing here over the summer months.
Yeah, and make him the second, co-owner of the series to join as well. Don't forget Kevin Harvick, part of the ownership group at the Cars Tours. So it's been all Dale Jr. every time he's come a part of it, and now Kevin Harvick's going to have his turn. So really cool to see Kevin be a part of that. Quick news and note, how about Thunder Road? They're creating the Squire Cup. They just honored the legendary Ken Squire a few weeks ago out at Thunder Road in Barrie, Vermont. They've got their own 3-leg Triple Crown being announced. It started last week with the Memorial Day Classic. It's going to continue on with the Governor's Cup here at the end of June, and then the Jack Daniels 100 July 4th weekend. So pretty cool deal honoring a legend in Ken Squire. And then, of course, Kyle, our debate topic of the week. It's been all about this word waiver. If I don't hear it again for the rest of my life, that would be great because that has dominated the headlines. But I am curious. This whole Kyle Larson waiver, of course, granted this week to give him playoff eligibility once again in the Cup Series. But we've seen drivers like Carson Kvapil miss a Cars Tour race to run a truck race or an Xfinity race. Could something like that fly on more of the regional level? Maybe a Ron Silk decides to take a week off from the tour and go run an Xfinity race or a truck race. Would a waiver apply in those scenarios? What do you think?
No, because they don't reset the points every 3 weeks at the end of the season.
That's
So,
right.
I mean, if you miss an event, then you're that many more points out of championship contention. I think the Cup Series or the National Series, the Trucks, Xfinity, and Cup is really where it only matters because it's like a free pass, right? I mean, Kyle Busch missed half the season a couple of years ago and still won the championship. So, I mean, if you can do that, then I don't know. I'm still on the fence about the whole waiver thing. You either run them all or you don't. If you get injured, that's part of the sport, right? I mean, you don't want to see anybody
unless you're snowboarding, because that's not a part of the sport, technically.
That's true. No, and you're right. But either way, whether you're snowboarding or in a NASCAR Xfinity Series race on Saturday and get injured and can't compete in the Cup Series race, I mean, that's a risk you take. You're still going 170 to 195 miles per hour, depending on the racetrack, and sorry, but Kyle Larson got the waiver, and we'll continue to talk about his championship run throughout the rest of the season.
Yeah, and I think the best thing to kind of put a bow on this too is NASCAR did probably what they needed to do to avoid the least amount of fallout, right? Because can you imagine if we don't give Kyle a waiver and he goes out and wins 5 more races, regular season champion, and then all the discussion is asterisk, whoever wins the title didn't have to race against Kyle technically for the championship. It's going to create a whole can of worms. So kudos to NASCAR for making the right decision. Go ahead, Kyle.
Or they say, you know what, we're not eligible for the championship, so we're not going to go to XYZ Cup race because it doesn't pay a lot. And Team Hendrick sponsors the car anyway, or HendrickCars.com. So we don't really have any major obligations. So we're just going to take the weekend off because we're not eligible.
Can you imagine if he skipped a Cup race to go run a sprint car? What that would do? Shockwaves.
Or go hang out on Lake Norman on the boat.
Oh, my goodness. Well, Kyle Rickey, good. This was good. This was interesting. Of course, everybody's had their opinion this week. It was really good to kind of talk about it. But nonetheless, that decision is made. It's over. We look ahead to the rest of the Cup season. Hey, speaking of looking ahead, this weekend there's quite a bit of local races, but as far as on the national schedule, we've got the week off for the Modified Tour. We've got the week off for the ARCA Menard Series, the National Tour. We've got the week off for the Canada Series. But hey, ARCA West, we're back at it. 2 for 2 on the road courses. Sonoma's next up this weekend, of course, out there in Sonoma and wine country. 6:30 Eastern time will be that race on Friday night. Kyle, entry list just came out. Not only are we having William Sawalich trying to go 2 for 2 on the road courses, Brent Cruz is making a West appearance. Of course, he's been a part of the East Series this year. Jack Wood is back. But how about the NASCAR presence on the National Series? Noah Gragson, Sam Mayer, Brandon Jones is back. What appeals, you think, are these races for these NASCAR, either Cup or Xfinity drivers, to go get some extra laps?
Well, and that's it. Extra laps. I mean, it paid off, I guess kind of paid off for Brandon Jones last week. Didn't really talk about him much on Saturday in the Xfinity Series event. But, he got those extra laps on Friday and did well. We talked to him on Friday before the race in Portland, and he said that he was going to do back-to-back road course events. A lot of these drivers, they don't have a lot of road course experience. The Xfinity Series, until recently, maybe ran one road course a year up until, say, 2 or 3 years ago when they started to make this West Coast swing. Never really saw the Xfinity cars go to Sonoma until 2 years ago, so they don't have a lot of laps there. And obviously, the track is completely different from what it was when we were there last year at this time with the brand new pavement that'll debut this weekend for at least NASCAR competitors. So extra laps, extra seat time is everything, especially now when you don't have a lot of road racing on the schedule and you're going to a racetrack that's brand new. And it'll be interesting to watch that West race to kick off the race weekend and see exactly, what these drivers learned and how they can adapt what they learned to their Xfinity Series car.
100%. It's learning and adapting it for the Xfinity or Cup Series drivers like Noah Gragson competing, but I think it also just raises the level of competition for a Brent Cruz or a William Sawalich or a Sean Hingorani. I mean, Gio Ruggiero in the field with this one as well. So you look at kind of the up-and-comers running for a championship, whether it's ARCA West, East, or the National Series. getting to go toe-to-toe with a Brandon Jones or a Noah Gragson or a Sam Mayer. I think that's awesome for the series. Love these events that these guys and girls come over and run. We'll see who gets it done there. But as far as championship, Kyle, Sean Hingorani wants to forget about what happened in Portland. He finished like 3 or 4 laps down, was a non-factor, had all sorts of issues, including brakes was the big part of it on pit road. He was down there in my section and absolutely was just beside himself with how the brakes were handling. So that car was not up to snuff. He's now down 10 to Tyler Reif in the championship. Can he get back? Now, he's back in that Jerry Pitts ride, Kyle, but I don't know. Sean Hingorani with Venturini last year winning the championship, it's been a tough road to hoe for him this year.
Yeah, went into last weekend, 3 races, 3 different race teams, a lot of obstacles to overcome, including some mechanical issues last week. So, sure, I mean, 10 points isn't a whole lot. They're still early in their season, a lot of racing to come, including a big field event this weekend in Sonoma, and then a lot of short tracks on the horizon for the West Series, including a doubleheader weekend, July 4th weekend at Irwindale.
That's right. General Tire 200 again Friday night, 6:30 Eastern. That broadcast on Flow Racing. Also this weekend, the 3rd annual Jack Ingram Memorial at Hickory. Of course, that is a big late model event. Landon Huffman said he's going to run after leaving the Cars Tour full time. He's going to bring his Huffman Racing car back out there. Lots more races going on. That one 111 laps. A big, big honor to Mr. Jack Ingram, the late Jack Ingram. Open Modified 80, Kyle at Stafford. What can you tell us about that one on Friday?
Carson Lofton coming to town, the driver that we have talked about so much down south, has won a majority of the Smart Modified Tour races to open up their season in 2024, makes his first trip to New England and will run here on Friday night, the Casella Waste Open 80. Going to have a stacked field, all of the stars that compete here weekly for the most part in the SK Modifieds. A lot of them will be in that Open Modified race, including one of the winningest drivers here at this racetrack in Woody Pitcat. So Ronnie Williams, a 2-time champion, will be in the race. Great entry list. Will be interesting to see how Carson handles modified racing up here in modified country.
Love the challenge. That's going to be a good one out there at Stafford on Friday. Also running on Friday are the Supermods at Thunder Road. And then, of course, Saturday is your home for a weekly racing between Riverhead, Bowman Gray, Nashville Fairgrounds. We had the Pass Series out at Oxford, Slinger, and much, much more. Kyle, before we go, your K-Rick Driver of the Week here as we get June started.
Hard to go against Andrew Ranger, NASCAR Canada winner last week, 32nd career win in that series, first win in nearly 2 years. Did what he had to do late in the race, took the lead with 9 to go, as we talked about earlier. Currently second in the championship standings, not too far out of the lead. So I've always been a big Andrew Ranger fan, one of the nicest guys in the pits, a veteran of that tour, and gets it done for the first time in 2 years last weekend.
All right. NASCAR Canada represented here in K-Rick's Driver of the Week. Now, MRN is off this week, but we are back we're back in a big way in 2 weeks' time because we are going to Iowa, back to Iowa for the first ever Cup Series race there in Newton, Iowa. They have the fresh repave on the bottom, which has certainly been a big topic of discussion, but of course, we'll be back with that coming up next week. So, a week off for the MRN crew, much needed. We'll be back next week. I'm looking forward to that, and that'll do it for this week's episode. Kyle, final thoughts? What a show, man.
Yeah, you mentioned Memorial Day weekend is behind us. All the series are up and running. All the short tracks are up and running on a weekly basis. I mean, Motor Racing Network, Flow Racing, your home for, national racing, obviously with the Cup Xfinity Truck and ARCA series and all the short track stuff on Flow Racing. And we have you covered here every week on NASCAR Coast to Coast. Certainly a lot to talk about. My favorite time of year.
You're darn right. We got a lot to talk about, and we're going to do it all again next week. Kyle, thank you so much. For our producer, Pat Jackers, our guest this week, Luke Fenhaus. My name is Chris Wilner. Thanks for tuning in to NASCAR Coast to Coast, brought to you by our friends at Whelen Engineering, manufactured in America for over 70 years. Whelen Engineering. We will see you next week here on Coast to Coast.